my last video, I went on for a bit about the 5 stages of owning a Leica Q, and I got to the conclusion that it is now time for a new camera for me. And while I stated in that video that I already had a very clear idea of what that next camera purchase would be for me, I actually did get a lot of very interesting suggestions from you guys in the comments below that video. And first of all, just thank you for that. It truly meant a lot to me, and I've read all of the comments. I certainly do want to reply to a lot of them in the future when I find the time, but I do also want to take a bit of time to answer some of those very well thought through comments. But be that as it may, one of the cameras that was suggested quite a lot was the Leica Q343, for obvious reasons I guess, and also the Nikon ZF. And then there were a couple of suggestions that were perhaps a bit more outlandish, if you like, a bit more exotic. A couple of you actually recommended that I should go with a medium format camera. A lot of you mentioned the Fuji GFX camera line. Others went with Hasselblad, and of course there were quite a few of you who were already suggesting that I should go with a Leica M camera, and some of you were already congratulating me on buying a Leica M11. So it seems to me that a lot of you guys actually know me really well, because that's exactly what happened. I went out and bought a Leica M11-P and 2 lenses as well for it, but more on that in a minute or so. Now, I am not a rich person, so a camera purchase like this is certainly not something that I can just afford on a whim. So truth be told, I've been saving up for a Leica M11-P for a long while now, pretty much since this camera was announced, because I already sort of wanted a Leica M11, and when they announced the Leica M11-P, I just thought, okay, that's it. That's pretty much the perfect camera, considering it's an M camera, and it really just invoked that sort of burning desire, that sort of lust. And yeah, I wanted to have it for so long. I've been saving up, and now was the right time, and I'm super happy that I'm finally able to have this camera. Now, obviously, I've only had this camera for a couple of days so far, but I do have some initial thoughts, and I mean, what's the point of having thoughts if you're not putting them online, right? And so I decided to make this video, and also just to make this a bit more interesting for you guys visually, I'm going to sprinkle in a bit of POV footage here and there of a hike that I went on last weekend with this beauty in the Black Forest, where I took a couple of photos. Anyway, I am still a bit shocked that I actually ended up buying this camera, in part just because it just proves how incredibly predictable I apparently am. Because you see, when I got my first Fujifilm X100, the F or the 4 as you would call it nowadays, back in 2018, people were already telling me that this was just a substitute for a Leica, and that I would eventually go either straight to an M body or buy the gateway drug, aka the Leica Q, first. At the time, I honestly could not see that being the case at all, at least not in regards to the Leica M. And I certainly also had no desire whatsoever to own a Leica. I had no attachment to Leica as a brand at all. And truth be told, I kind of just thought that it was a bit of a snobby rich person's camera that actually is not very capable, but just extremely overpriced. And honestly, I also was nowhere near being able to afford a camera like that. So it was completely out of my league, but I didn't mind that, because it was also just not something that I was interested in at all. But it wasn't too long until curiosity eventually got the better of me, and I managed to make a bit more money. And so I decided to buy the Leica Q, because I wanted to see what a camera with the same concept of the Fuji X100, so a fixed lens camera, would be like with a full frame sensor and image stabilization. And as you know by now, At first, I wasn't too happy with the camera, but over time, I have really grown to love it. And that's still true to this day. I love my Leica Q2 and I could never sell it. But as I stated in my last video, over time, I lost a bit of the initial passion and it sort of got a bit boring to just shoot at 28mm. And so over time, I got more and more curious to find out whether or not using or shooting with a Leica M body and a manual focusing lens might actually work for me. Because after all, while I do have a Sony a7 IV, which is an incredibly capable camera, and while I do love my Leica Q2, I shoot mostly for fun. I do not shoot photography with the specific reason to make money off of my photography. I don't do like wedding or action sports or whatever photography where I do have to get the shot. So for me, it really doesn't matter if a couple of my images are slightly out of focus. What matters most to me is that I do get a good photo every now and again to keep me going, and also that I do enjoy the process. That's perhaps even the most important part for me. You see, I just want to have fun and I want to live out this more creative part of my personality. And if I get a good image as well at the end of the day, that's just the icing on the cake, if you like. So yeah, fast forward a couple of years and today I'm sitting here with this beautiful Leica M11-P as well as a burning hole in my bank account. And so let's talk about my initial thoughts about this beautiful camera. Okay, so I think even if you hate Leica, you still have to admit that this is a beautiful piece of kit and a very iconic design. It's certainly the most beautiful camera that I know of. And as I stated earlier, I wanted to have one since the day that Leica first announced it. It's simple and elegant and invokes kind of a burning desire just to have it. It's a work of art, if you ask me. Surprisingly though, it feels even better than it looks. I mean, I was expecting a lot considering the price point, and I have had the opportunity to play around with different Leica M cameras over the years, just here and there, but not for any lengthy period of time. So first of all, it's heavy. This setup with the Voigtlander 50mm f1.2 is about the same size as my Leica Q2, but compared to this, the Leica Q2 feels like it's just an empty shell. Now that is obviously mostly down to the brass top plate and the ridiculous amount of glass that is inside of this Voigtlander lens, but the overall package just feels super solid. It's not just that though, it's also just a feast for your senses. Every button feels tactile and precise. The sound that the mechanical shutter makes is just wonderful. The display is fantastic, the menus are simple and easy to understand. You have all the important stuff right there where you want it to be. Aperture, shutter speed, ISO, focusing ring, nothing more and nothing less than what you need. With all that being said, I actually do have some reservations though, because one of the features that I liked most about the Leica Q2 was the fact that it has an IP52 rating, which means that I am able to use it out in the rain for hours on end. With this Leica M11-P on the other hand, I'm not too sure. First of all, it doesn't have a rating. The lenses I use don't have any sort of rubber sealing. I have no idea how well the body itself is sealed off, and it is of course a lot more expensive to replace if I were to actually damage it. And so yeah, I guess we'll see about that. But while I'm not going to baby this camera, there is actually a high likelihood that I will be a bit more careful and probably put this camera away, especially in sustained downpours, simply because I don't want to risk it and because, yeah, losing it would really hurt just from a financial standpoint. But I mean, I also do like this camera, but yeah, just financially speaking, replacing this camera would not be fun. So I'm going to be a bit more careful than I was with the Leica Q2. And I really just like the fact that I didn't have to be careful with the Leica Q2 because it had that rating, and it has never failed me no matter what I decided to put the Leica Q2 through. Aside from that though, there's also one other feature that's missing on the Leica M11-P, and I really wish that it would have it. And no, I'm not talking about autofocusing, but I am talking about IBIS. I think having IBIS is just a must at this point, especially for a camera at this price point. And yeah, honestly, I also just really do not get it. I mean, the Leica SL3 has IBIS. There are a lot of cameras with a similar, if not the same, sensors with 60 megapixels that do have IBIS. With the Leica Q line, you do at least get a stabilized lens, but none of that with this camera. And it's a bit of a missed opportunity if you ask me. I can only assume that they intentionally held back so that they would have some sort of killer feature that they could provide with the Leica M12 eventually. But yeah, that's a bit of a shame. I would love for this camera to have IBIS. Obviously, I have to see if I will actually miss having it out in the real world, because I did decide to buy some faster glass, and with this 50mm f1.2 or the 28mm f1.5 I am able to shoot in low light situations, and I'm usually also able to shoot at like 1/30th of a second, maybe even slower, handheld without having too many issues. And so yeah, I guess that's a good way to talk about the lenses that I bought for this camera for a quick second. Okay, so for now I only have two lenses, and those are the Voigtlander 28mm f1.5 VM2 as well as the Voigtlander 50mm f1.2 Nocturne. Both are great from what I can tell so far. Both will work in low light conditions and also have a lot of character. In fact, so far I'm so impressed with these lenses that I have almost no desire to buy a Leica M lens, but will instead probably just stock up on Voigtlander lenses to add a bit more variety to the mix. But yeah, so far I got my two favorite focal lengths in the bag, and everything after that is pretty much just bonus. So with all of that stuff out of the way, what has it been like using this camera, which has been my dream camera for many years now, over the past few days? And well, what can I say? I loved every second of it. And in a weird twist of events, that is probably down to expectation management. Because you see, going into this purchase, I obviously knew that this camera would not have autofocus, and so I was expecting to be struggling with manual focusing for, I don't know, at least a couple of weeks, if not months. And that's actually not what happened at all. So from just a physical and aesthetical standpoint, I was completely overwhelmed by how amazing this camera is, but also using it, it's incredible how intuitive that manual focusing actually is. I would go so far as to say that my hit rate is probably not far off from what I get when I'm using something like my Leica Q2 or even my Sony a7 IV. Granted, I do not shoot a lot of fast-paced, fast-moving objects and such, but yeah, for the kind of stuff that I do, manual focusing is actually not an issue whatsoever. Plus, the process of manual focusing is incredibly fun, very involving. It really makes you stop and think. And if you get it right, which you usually do, it is very rewarding. And so overall, it's just a more enjoyable process. You're more sort of sucked into your photography. You're very much focused and there and thinking about it. And if you get it right, it's just, I don't know, it's just a joy. I really do like it. I will see, obviously, if that grows old over time, but so far, yeah, it's really just a very enjoyable experience overall. Another part of using this Leica M that I wasn't too sure about was just the fact that it is an actual rangefinder camera. Now the Leica Q2 has an EVF, so while it looks like a rangefinder camera, it obviously isn't. And using a rangefinder is a bit different in the sense that you only have sort of a vague idea of your framing, and that can make framing your composition a bit harder. But from what I can say so far is that the framing is actually pretty accurate, at least if your subject is a couple of meters away from me. And so I would say that using the rangefinder actually also wasn't an issue whatsoever. And if I am shooting something that is a bit closer by, or I'm trying to get a composition where I really do want to get the framing right and I don't want to crop anything in post, I simply use the live view, which also helps when you want to manual focus and for whatever reason it doesn't really work with the rangefinder. And yeah, that's always a good solution to have, I guess. So using a rangefinder to shoot photos, super pleasing, super easy. Getting your shots in focus, even when I'm using this 50mm f1.2 with the aperture wide open, is actually very doable, and the hit rate was a bit of a surprise to me. But yeah, so far I really enjoy it. And just that feeling of being that involved in your photography, again, it's just very enjoyable to me. And I cannot tell you how much I'm looking forward to using this camera more and more and more, and taking it on a couple of trips and photo walks and all of that stuff. Aside from that, so far at least, I can really just mention that battery life has been great so far. Also, having internal memory, 256 gigs, is also just great. It's a bit of a godsend. I wish more cameras had that. I am struggling a bit with the rangefinder when I'm shooting in portrait orientation, because I'm so used to having my thumb here, and that just means that I'm smudging up the glass all of the time, or I'm blocking the rangefinder when I'm holding the camera like this. But obviously I'm learning that, because yeah, obviously once you look through the rangefinder viewfinder, you immediately see your finger, and I just have to get used to that, I guess. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm very much amazed by this camera. I'm super happy to finally have it and finally be able to use it. I am probably very much in the honeymoon phase with this camera, so yeah, I'll get back to you probably a couple of months down the road and let you know if I still like it or if I've already grown out of love. But yeah, I'll keep you posted. For now though, I honestly could not be happier with my purchasing decision, and it's honestly just a bit astounding how sometimes going down a more simple route seems like the right way forward. Well, for me anyway. And so all I need now is just a bit more free time and disposable income so that I can go travel with this camera and really put it through its paces. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. I hope this was interesting to you. I will keep you updated on this camera, and I will probably make a lot more videos about this camera, using this camera. And yeah, I'm just excited to get back into photography. Also, spring is just around the corner, and yeah, I'm just super excited because it's finally the time of the year again where I get home from work and there's still sunlight available, and so that just means that there are a lot more opportunities to go out and shoot, and I can't wait to do that, especially since I now have this dream camera of mine. Anyway, that's really all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was interesting to you. If you do like videos of this type, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you in another one. Until then, take care. Bye.